All right, so last video we ended with creating the Oracle beacon and then also initializing our TWAP Oracle contract with the correct upgradable features such as ownable and pausable. So now we're going to continue with that and start working on our factory so we can create some upgradable TWAP oracles from the factory itself. So let's create in our source folder, create a new file called TWAP factory.sol. And so in here, we will initialize the same thing. So pragma solidity, just do that version for now. And we will also create it as MIT here. Now that we have that, we can start adding the basically the correct dependencies that we'll be using in this contract itself. So let's create for now just the contract. Contract and TWAP factory, and we'll just get rid of this for now. So now that we have that, we are going to also, before I forget, create in the same source folder, we're going to create a new directory, and that's going to be just the interfaces. So we can start creating those interfaces and inheriting from those. So now that we have that, let's create a couple interfaces. One being the actual TWAP Oracle, so TWAP Oracle.sol, and then also the interface for the factory.sol. Right, so now that we have these, we can also inherit from our factory to begin with. So let's inherit, and this will be for the TWAP factory. We'll also inherit ownable. We'll bring these in as well. They're not going to be upgradable for this, so just ownable. And that should be it for now. So now that we have that, we can also bring in our ownable contract from OpenZeppelin. Copy that in. We can also bring the Oracle beacon in because we'll be using that. And that should be okay for now. Actually, we can import the interface for the TWAP. Perfect. So now that we have all of this, this is going to be red because there's obviously nothing in that file yet, but we don't need anything as of right now. So let's create our constructor first. So in the constructor, we will, because again, it's not upgradable, we can just have a constructor that will pass in an address, which is the blueprint. So when we want to create this factory, to initialize and deploy the factory, we'll need a blueprint that is already deployed. So this will be here. And then also, like we did before, we will do a version. And so in that, it already has it for us. We will create a beacon state variable, which will be just the new Oracle beacon. And we can put that in right now. Oracle beacon, public beacon. What we can do is also, we won't need to make this immutable, but we can be public viewing, so that's not a problem. So now that we have that, we need to have a new instance. So the structure for the instance should be pretty simple. This will be what we create each time so that users can have or should have either one or multiple instances. And so that instance will be reflected to a beacon proxy. which will just be a proxy that points to your instance, and then the address of the owner. So when you actually interact with this contract, you're actually interacting with the proxy and not the actual blueprint. And so each instance will be a proxy address, and then also who owns that instance. And so let's create also a modifier. And what this modifier will do is anybody that is authorized can update this. So this will be used for a couple things, and we'll go in that in a second. So let's call it is authorized. That'll take in an address, which is a user. And then we'll do an if statement, which is if user equals address of nil, we will revert, and we'll create some error handling here. So for right now, we'll just do a 0 address, and we'll create this in a second. And then also, if not the message.sender is the user, or the message.sender equals the owner of the contract, then we will revert to unauthorized. Well, so now that we have those there as well, we have a 0 address here and an unauthorized here, and that should be good. We can add those in a second. And we should also add the counters. So we're going to use a counter, which is just going to increment us for the next usable one. And so we'll add that in a second. But let's create a function that physically creates our contract. So from below the constructor, we'll create a new function called create TWAP Oracle, and this will be an address of an admin, so whoever is going to be the admin of the contract, an address of the factory, and this will be passed in later, and a address of the keeper registry. And we'll go over all of that down the line. This will be external. We'll also make another modifier that has an instance. So for now, we're only going to allow people to have one instance. So there's not people making multiple instances of each of these contracts. So you'll only be able to create one instance, but you can obviously alter this if you would like as well. And it's going to return the address of the proxy. So now that we have that, let's create a new beacon proxy. So the beacon proxy, and we're just going to call it proxy, is going to equate to a new beacon proxy, which is going to have, like we passed in before, an address of a beacon, and then also the ABI encoded call. And so why we need this is we need to pass the actual call data in as encoded. So encoded call, we're going to pass in the TWAP Oracle dot initialize, which is the function that it needs to call to basically start off the after deployment. So when it deploys, it will immediately call the initialize function. And then we're going to pass in the factory. So these are the things that it needs in the initializer function: the keeper address and the admin. So now that we have all of that, let's backtrack and understand what's happening here. So we're creating a new proxy contract. So basically it's a new beacon proxy. What this proxy is basically just a version of the blueprint. So the current blueprint in our Oracle beacon, whatever this blueprint is pointing to, this will be a new version of that. And so now this is just a proxy contract that you'll interact with. And what we're doing in it is we're passing obviously the beacon. So whatever the beacon address is, and then passing in the encoded calls, which is what needs to be done when we deploy that. So in this case, we want to immediately call the initialize function and then passing in what needs to be passed into that initialize function so it sets up correctly. Cool. So now that we have that, we can finish this with number one, the instance. So we're going to create this in storage, which just means it's staying in the contract. So we're having a new tenant. We're just going to call users that have deployed instances of this already. We're going to call them tenants, which is a going to be part of an instances object, and then we'll create that up here. So basically it's just a mapping of instances that points to a specific address. So we'll add this up here, and then we'll also add another mapping, which is a instance or address to if an address has an instance or not. And this is basically used down the line as well if anybody has used this in this instance. All right, so now that we have that done, come back down here and then finish our create TWAP Oracle. Now that we have the instance mapping, we can do a new tenant. So new tenant dot proxy will equal the proxy, so the beacon proxy. We'll do a new tenant dot owner, which is going to be the admin. Is instance of the admin is just the new tenant. So basically instance of admin equals new tenant, and then instance counter dot increment, and we'll see what increment is in a second. And after that, let's emit an event. So we'll create an event called instance created. That way we can watch for these events later down the line, and we'll pass in an admin and also the address of the proxy itself. All right, and then at the very end, we will return that proxy address. Return the address of the proxy, and also add our event. So in the event for now, we'll have them in here. The reason why I don't have them for events or also the custom errors in here is it's a little bit cleaner to have the custom errors and everything in here. So let's do that quickly because we're inheriting. Everything will work just fine. So let's do this. Interface TWAP factory, and let's add in our custom errors. And functions. All right, and we will add our first function, which is the create TWAP Oracle function, in here as well. And that should, at least for now, wrap up the factory interface. So let's go back here. TWAP factory. Let's see why we're getting an error from that. That should be fine. Take a look at that in a second. So now that we have our create TWAP Oracle function done, let's now start diving into the other functions that we have left to do for the factory. We should probably create the other modifier as well now, which is the has an instance. And again, all this is doing is checking if the address who's going to call to deploy already has one. So in this case, from here we actually forgot the underscore. Oops. Cool, there's that. And then for here, we aren't going to do has instance. We are first going to check if the user is a nil address. You always want to do this just in case. And this should be a 0 address. And then also check if the message.sender is the user or the message.sender equals the owner. And we're going to revert with unauthorized. Great, so let's check what this error is. Beacon proxy is not initialized. So let's do that. We're going to bring in beacon proxy from Open Zeppelin. And basically this is just saying that this is a beacon proxy type. So that's done now. And we will need to create an update function. So to update when a blueprint needs to be updated. So say we need to make some type of upgrade to the actual implementation contract. We can do that through the update beacon instance. And this is going to take in a address, which is a blueprint, and a string, which is going to be call data, and we'll call it updated version. Again, this is the versioning that you want to do. Not necessarily needed, but good to actually see for versioning reasons. We're going to allow only the owner to call this, and then we're going to do the built-in function for beacon, which is upgrade the new implementation contract, which is the new blueprint, and then also this version. And I spelled the updated wrong. Okay, so that's good to go for update. Now we're going to do a get instance function. So all this is going to do is get the current instance. Just a nice helper function for you to check out which is the current address for the instance so that you can check it out yourself. It's going to be an external function because it's only going to be called externally. It's going to only return an address, so we can use view, and it's going to return an address. And then we can return, well, first, we can return the instances of the instance, so whatever instance it's passed back, and then and obviously the proxy, because the proxy is an address. Great. So let's add one more, which is the get implementation. So this will get the current implementation. Get implementation, which again is not going to have any arguments. It will be external again. It will be a view function, and it will return an address. And then again, it's just going to be using the current beacon and then passing in the implementation like we did here. All right, and the last one is just another helper function, which is the get current version. And a lot of these are just here for a little extra help, so you don't need to know about the actual beacon, the deployed Oracle beacon. You can just check out the factory. So you as a user who wants to make a new TWAP Oracle can come in here, check out the Oracle factory yourself, and actually see the first or the newest implementation, and not have it as confusing as if you're trying to check through a bunch of addresses through logs or something like that. So let's see what's happening on here. The TWAP Oracle, I should have that implemented, so let me take a look. I see. So I don't have that interface. No, I don't. So let's import that. So TWAP Oracle interface, and that will be from interfaces TWAP Oracle. So TWAP Oracle should be here. Take a look at why this isn't not found. Let's see, do we have that? Nope, no, we don't have that yet. So let's build that quickly. Interface TWAP Oracle. And again, we'll take the same Pragma versions as this, bring that over there. Perfect, so that's good there. This should be good. Sometimes if we back out and go back into it, it will fix. There we go. So we won't get that anymore. So let's check out the instances. Yeah, I don't think we have instances correct. And then instance counter. We haven't actually added the counter yet, so let's do that currently. So the counter again is going to implement the actual amount of instances. So again, we'll import it counters from the OpenZeppelin counters, and we'll also, because it is a library, we will be using counters for counters.counters, and that way we should have a new variable which will be a counters.counters public and then instance counter. So now that we have an instance counter, we can implement that usage down here. Again, TWAP Oracle, the initialize function's not done yet, so let's do that quickly and wrap up this video. So the Oracle, again, should have an initialize function, and just copy it from over here. Let's go back in the Oracle, and for now, to get this working, we'll add our initializer here. And so if we back out of there and get back in again, it should be fine. Good. One more thing. Look up an API. Take a look. Again, I think this is because it's not being passed in correctly. This should be good. Okay, so that will wrap up this video. In the next one, we'll go over now to start implementing the actual TWAP Oracle, adding the functions that we need from there now that we have the factory set up. And once we have the TWAP Oracle with the interface correctly, then we'll be able to start testing.